Hello again, everyone. Dave Benson here with the Center for Personal Protection and Safety. I'm the Senior Advisor for Threat Mitigation and Global Operations. And consistent with our month-long sessions talking about healthcare, workplace violence prevention, intervention in healthcare, I want to have a little conversation with you today on how you might want to consider teaching an active assailant response in a healthcare situation. You know, violence in healthcare is a serious problem that's increased in frequency over the past decade. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, healthcare and social services personnel are about 5 times more likely to experience workplace violence prevention as other occupations. In addition, healthcare facilities are not immune for acts of violence, such as active assailant incidents. So the goal of this video, as I said before, is to provide you with an organizational specific way of teaching active assailant response in a healthcare setting. So what do you do if a de-escalation doesn't work? An aggressor becomes an assailant, or if there's an intruder that you think is determined to hurt people? Why, we hope you'll never be faced with a circumstance like this, such as an extreme violent event. Here's how we recommend the response options should be communicated with your staff. Healthcare workers embrace a special duty of care commitment that compels them to be both a survivor and a protector. You know, there's many things that you can do to survive and protect others during an active assailant episode. The most effective option starts right now with this concept of a survivor-protector mindset. The survivor-protector mindset is what you learn and nurture when you train for the unthinkable. It includes the willingness to accept the possibility that you could find yourself in a life-threatening situation, or your patients or visitors or coworkers, which means you're going to have to make split-second choices. Now, you basically have 3 options: run, hide, or fight. But we at the center for a long time have been promoting the concept of the outs, which is really very consistent with run, hide, fight, but it provides more meat on that skeletal infrastructure. And so I'm going to be walking you through recommended options. I want to highlight now, and probably will before we leave, this is an options-based approach. It is not a linear approach. I think a big mistake that's often made is you either run, or you hide, or you fight. The reality of it is you may have to run. If you're not able to run, you might have to hide until it's safe to run again and get out of this situation. And then you also have to consider, albeit a very personal decision, to consider what you can do to neutralize the threat for you and your team or your patient. So if you are in imminent danger, then it stands to reason that your responses must be immediate. If you determine you can get out to a safe area, as far away from the assailant as you can, especially if it means you'll be able to get help, by all means try to do so, if you're able to do that. There really is no substitute for being away from where the threat is. Now, all the other threat options involve you still considering that you're in relatively close proximity with an imminent threat. So getting out of that area if you can, which, as I said before, may or may not be possible because of your situation in a hospital or a patient. If there are people you can guide to safety as well and assist them in taking shelter to shelter yourself, which would be the second option, hide, do so quickly and with authority. Don't wait for others to validate your decision, and leave your belongings behind. The best way to survive an active assailant situation is not to be there, as I said before, and certainly not to be where they can see you. If it's safe to do so, be sure to call appropriate authorities once you've reached a safe location, because another thing that we have learned through studying thousands of these cases is that everybody thinks somebody else has notified the authorities of the threat. And consequently, sometimes the delay can have life-threatening consequences through no fault of the first responders. They just don't know about the event. be sure to call the appropriate authorities, particularly the outside authorities calling 911. Your operational chain of command is not the time to make that kind of a notification unless you're comfortable that there's time to make some decisions. But if it's an imminent threat, you need to call out, and you need to call out to the first responders immediately. In addition, if your facility has duress or panic buttons or silent alarms, consider using them as quickly as possible. So when in imminent danger, your actions need to be immediate. Keep that in mind. What is their mobility? Are they alone, meaning the assailant, or is there more than one? Are patient rooms equipped with fire doors? Do you have lockable doors? Is there a bathroom included in the area? Do you know which rooms can be locked from the inside on your floor? Any room that can be locked is a potential shelter. It's not a perfect answer, but if you can't get away, and you, by going out into the hallway or trying to leave the building, put yourself into greater harm, consider this. If there's interior windows, be sure to block them. You can run and turn out the lights to make sure the room appears to be unoccupied. We know from, again, lots of studies that many active assailants that will try to go to room, if there's any barrier at all, they may well move on to another location. If you're trapped in an open area with no real hiding options, which can happen, and no means of exit, try to put anything between you and the assailant. The other thing is, by all means, spread out. Don't make yourself an easy target. We have learned from other tragedies such as Virginia Tech and others that the natural human reaction is to gather together and huddle together for support and wait for the first responders. And we now know that that is not an effective strategy. In fact, it actually resulted in greater injury and loss of life. So in patient rooms, for example, beds with locking brakes can be used as barricades to keep the assailant out. I don't recommend it if you have a patient in the bed, but if there's a spare bed. But as I said, in an open area, spread out, resist that urge to huddle together, and plan and work as a team if you can, if you're in this situation with others. Finally, there's the option that none of us really want to think about, directly confronting the assailant. Now, that's a critical decision you can only make. It has shown over time to be an effective decision, but nonetheless, you have to make that determination. As I said before, this is not a linear progression. This is an options-based approach. You know, most rooms are full of things that can be effective tools for defense. Yelling, throwing objects, fire extinguishers, putting trays, dollies, all those things can be helpful. And the other thing is, if we have a fully armed individual, the goal is to get the weapon or weapons out of their hands. Remember, if you're making the decision to fight for your life or the life of your patient or for your colleagues, you need to do whatever it takes to stop or neutralize the threat. A final piece on this extreme option, and that is resist the urge to pick up the weapon if somehow you've managed to extricate it from the assailant. The reason for that is first responders don't know if you're the threat or not. If they come blowing through the door, we could have an even more tragic situation. So cordon it off, watch it, kick it out of the way. There's lots of things you can do, but do not pick up that weapon. So speaking of the arrival of first responders, the danger gap might end, but there's still potential danger because the first responders, as I said before, are there to neutralize the threat. They're not to make you feel better. They're not there to question you at that time. They want to know where the threat is so they can neutralize it, so they can secure that scene and then begin the triaging that's so important. The officers have been taught that hands kill. So show your hands, follow their instructions, and that's the safest way. You may not be treated particularly well. You might be handcuffed. They might segregate you into another area until I can identify who you are, despite the fact that you're in scrubs. But nonetheless, comply with those orders. Survivor protectors quickly assess the situation to figure out that best response. This is an option-based approach. It's not just, well, I'll run, and if I can't run, well, I'll hide, and if I can't hide, I'll fight. There are dozens of documented success stories where people have picked multiple options throughout an active assailant scenario and have survived the event and kept other colleagues secure. So what I always like to tell my students and my clients is believe what you see and hear and pick an option. Continue to believe what you see and hear and pick another option. Continue to believe what you see and hear and pick another option, whether that be run, hide, or fight, or back to another earlier option until you're safely out of that danger gap. So in sum, be prepared and committed to take action as soon as it's required. Remember, you can make a difference. So I hope you found this helpful. This is a way that we have successfully, over the last decade and a half, trained folks in the healthcare community in responding to an active assailant situation. If you have further questions or interested in more information, please reach out to info@cpps.com. And until next time, stay safe out there.